Welcome, fellow travelers of the dark. Tonight, we descend into the suffocating depths of one of modern horror's most unnerving achievements, a film that understands that the most terrifying darkness isn't found in shadowed corners or creaking attics, but in the unexplored caverns of the human psyche. Jennifer Kent's 2014 film The Babadook stands as a monument to psychological horror, a work that strips away the comfortable distance between viewer and victim, forcing us to confront the monsters we carry within ourselves. This is not entertainment for those seeking cheap thrills or momentary jolts of adrenaline. This is horror that lingers, that seeps into your consciousness like cold water through cracked foundations. It's a film that asks uncomfortable questions about grief, about motherhood, about the parts of ourselves we dare not acknowledge in daylight. So steel yourself. What we're about to explore goes far beyond simple scares. We're venturing into the territory where horror becomes mirror, reflecting back truths we'd rather leave unexamined. The wounds that won't close. Our story centers on Amelia, a woman whose life was shattered 7 years ago in a single, devastating moment. Her husband, Oscar, died driving her to the hospital, died bringing their son, Samuel, into the world. This wasn't just tragedy. It was a cosmic injustice that forever tangled love and loss into an impossible knot. Every year, Samuel's birthday arrives, not as celebration, but as anniversary of death. Every moment of joy with her son carries within it the shadow of what was taken. 7 years. 7 years of unprocessed agony. 7 years of sleepless nights and hollow days. 7 years of pretending the wound has healed when it's actually festering, spreading its infection through every aspect of her existence. Look at Amelia's world, truly look at it. The house is drained of warmth, of life, of color. It's all grays and blues and shadows that seem to expand rather than recede. This isn't just production design. It's visual representation of a mind consumed by depression. The rooms feel smaller than they should, the ceilings lower, the walls closer. Everything is pressing inward, suffocating, crushing. This is what it feels like to live inside trauma. The world itself becomes a cage, and Samuel, 6 years old, wild-eyed, building weapons out of household items, screaming about monsters that no one else can see. The other children avoid him. The school wants him removed. Even his own mother can barely hide her exhaustion, her frustration, her mounting resentment. He's a difficult child, demanding, disruptive, prone to violent outbursts. But is he the cause of Amelia's unraveling, or its symptom? Is he reflecting back the chaos of her internal world, the monster he can sense growing in their home? The Book of Shadows, then comes the book. Mr. Babadook appears on Samuel's shelf, as if manifested from nightmare itself. It's a children's book in the most perverse sense, a pop-up tome of gathering dread. The illustrations are stark, angular, rendered in that unsettling style that seems to predate rational thought, reaching back to primal fears etched into our collective unconscious. The figure depicted within its pages is impossibly tall, impossibly thin, dressed in black with a top hat that suggests Victorian gentility, twisted into something predatory. But it's the words that truly chill, if it's in a word. Or it's in a look. You can't get rid of the Babadook. This is no ordinary children's story. This is a grimoire, a dark prophecy, a warning and invitation combined. Where did it come from? The film never tells us, because it doesn't matter. The Babadook doesn't come from anywhere external, it comes from within. It's always been there, waiting in the dark corners of Amelia's psyche, growing fat on 7 years of repressed grief and unacknowledged rage. Amelia tries to destroy the book. She tears it apart and throws it away. But the next day it returns, reassembled, with new pages, new illustrations, now showing Amelia herself committing unspeakable acts. The message is clear and terrifying. You cannot destroy what you refuse to acknowledge. The monster grows stronger with every attempt at denial. The face of unspoken dread. The Babadook's design is deliberately archaic, pulling from German expressionist cinema. Of the elongated shadows in the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, or the unnaturally tall figure of Count Orlok in Nosferatu, but Kent understands that the most effective horror is suggestion rather than revelation. We see the Babadook in fragments, a silhouette in a doorway, a shadow stretching across a ceiling, a shape that might be there or might be a trick of exhausted perception. Its voice is the stuff of nightmares, a rattling, rasping whisper that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. But listen closely. Whose voice is it really? When the Babadook speaks, it speaks with Amelia's own inflections, her own suppressed rage, her own taboo thoughts given horrible voice. "I'll eat you like a worm," it threatens Samuel. But it's not an external demon making this threat, it's Amelia's darkest impulses. The thoughts that arrive unbidden in moments of complete exhaustion. What if I just didn't have to do this anymore? What if he wasn't here? This is the film's most disturbing achievement, its willingness to explore the unspoken, unacceptable aspects of motherhood. Society demands that mothers be endlessly patient, endlessly loving, but Amelia is human. She's drowning, and in her drowning thoughts surface that no mother is supposed to have. Thoughts that fill her with shame and horror even as they become more intrusive, more insistent. The Babadook whispers these thoughts back to her, validates them, encourages them. It tells her she's right to be angry, right to resent this child who killed her husband by being born, right to want freedom from this crushing burden. This is the true horror, not that a monster is attacking her, but that she's being shown the monster she's becoming. The architecture of despair, every element of the film's visual language reinforces this descent into psychological breakdown. Notice how the house seems to change as the Babadook's presence grows stronger. Rooms feel different, larger and more threatening at night, claustrophobic during the day. The basement, where Oscar's possessions are stored like relics in a tomb, becomes a focal point of dread. Amelia hasn't been down there in 7 years. She can't. To go down there is to confront what she's spent 7 years avoiding. The lack of sleep is its own form of torture. Amelia's face becomes a mask of exhaustion, dark circles like bruises, eyes that can barely focus, a fragility in her movements that suggests she might shatter at any moment. Sleep deprivation is a known technique for breaking down psychological defenses, and we watch it happen in real time. Her grip on reality loosens. The boundaries between waking and nightmare blur. Is that really the Babadook she sees? Or is her mind creating monsters to externalize the horror she feels inside? Samuel's weapons, his catapult, his improvised spears, his constant vigilant stake on new meaning. He's not just a troubled child acting out. He's genuinely trying to protect his mother from something he can perceive but cannot understand. Children are sensitive to emotional atmospheres, and Samuel has spent his entire life breathing the toxic air of his mother's repressed grief. He builds weapons because he knows something is wrong, knows there's a threat, even if he can't articulate what that threat actually is. The Winter film's second act is a masterclass in psychological disintegration. Amelia becomes increasingly unstable. She loses her job, She isolates herself and Samuel from the outside world. She begins to see the Babadook everywhere, on television, in the shadows, standing in corners of rooms. But is she seeing a monster, or is she experiencing psychotic breaks brought on by untreated trauma and extreme sleep deprivation? Kent brilliantly maintains ambiguity. The horror works whether you interpret the Babadook as a literal supernatural entity or as a metaphor for mental illness. In fact, the film suggests these interpretations aren't mutually exclusive. Perhaps the boundaries between the psychological and the supernatural are more porous than we'd like to believe. Perhaps trauma does summon actual demons, or perhaps our demons are always psychological but no less real for being so. The turning point comes when Amelia, fully possessed by the Babadook's influence, pursues Samuel with murderous intent. She has become the monster. Her face is twisted, inhuman. Her voice is the Babadook's voice. This is horror at its most primal. The person who should provide safety becomes the source of threat. The mother becomes the predator. It's a violation of the most fundamental trust, and the film doesn't flinch from showing us how terrifying this transformation is for Samuel. But here's where the film reveals its true depth. Samuel doesn't give up on his mother. Even as she corners him, even as she seems lost to the darkness, he refuses to see her as the monster. "You're not my mother," he screams, not as rejection, but as recognition that his real mother is still in there, buried beneath the Babadook's influence. This child, this difficult, exhausting child, loves his mother enough to fight for her soul. The confrontation, what saves Amelia, is not some external intervention or magical solution. What saves her is Samuel's love acting as an anchor, reminding her of who she truly is beneath the grief and rage. She sees herself through his eyes, sees what she's become, what she's about to do, and in that moment of clarity, something breaks. She doesn't destroy the Babadook. She can't. As the book made clear from the beginning, you can't get rid of the Babadook. Instead, she confronts it. She screams at it, challenges it, asserts her dominance over it. "This is my house," she roars. Not, "There is no monster," but "I am stronger than the monster." This is the film's profound psychological insight. Healing doesn't come from denying our darkness, but from acknowledging and mastering it. Amelia stops running from her grief, stops pretending it doesn't exist. She turns and faces it, and in facing it, she reclaims her power. The Babadook remains, but it's forced back, pushed down into the basement with all those other painful memories, the aftermath. Learning to live with darkness, the film's final sequence, is deceptively simple but emotionally devastating. Time has passed. The house is brighter now, filled with light and color that was absent before. Amelia and Samuel are in the garden together, and there's a warmth between them that hasn't existed before. Samuel is calmer. Amelia is present in a way she hasn't been. Then Amelia collects worms in a bowl and descends to the basement. The Babadook is still there, lurking in the shadows. When it senses her approach, it emerges aggressive, threatening, trying to reassert dominance. But Amelia is firm. She doesn't cower. She doesn't flee. She feeds it the worms and leaves, locking the door behind her. This ending is brilliant in its implications. The Babadook, the grief, the trauma, the darkness still exists. It always will. Oscar is still dead. That pain will never completely disappear, but it's contained now. Amelia has learned to acknowledge it, to give it what it needs, attention, recognition, without letting it consume her entire life. She feeds the monster, but she doesn't let it out of the basement. This is what living with trauma actually looks like. Not victory, not cure, but management. Not erasure, but integration. The darkness becomes part of your house, part of your life, but it doesn't get to be the whole house. You keep living, you keep loving, you keep going. Why this horror matters: the Babadook terrifies us because it's about something real. We all carry darkness within ooze grief we haven't processed, rage we haven't expressed, parts of ourselves we're ashamed to acknowledge. The film shows us what happens when we deny these parts of ourselves, when we shove them down into basements and pretend they don't exist. They don't disappear. They grow. They transform into monsters. The film also speaks to the particular horror of motherhood under impossible circumstances, single parenthood, grief, financial stress, isolation, exhaustion. It shows us a woman who is genuinely doing her best and still drowning, still failing, still becoming someone she's horrified to see in the mirror. And it doesn't judge her for this. It shows compassion for her struggle, even as it doesn't excuse the harm. She Nearly Causes. Kent has created something rare, a horror film that's genuinely about something, that uses the genre's tools to explore real, psychological, and emotional territory. The scares aren't there for their own sake. They're there to make us feel what Amelia feels, to understand her terror from the inside. Conclusion: facing our schnozer, greatest monsters are the ones we create ourselves through denial, through avoidance, through refusing to acknowledge the darkness within. The Babadook forces us to look at what we'd rather ignore: our grief, our rage, our capacity for harm, the parts of ourselves that scare us most. But it also offers hope. Not the false hope of easy answers or magical cures, but the real hope that comes from courage. The courage to face our monsters, to name them, to learn to live with them without being destroyed by them. Amelia's journey reminds us that healing isn't about becoming undamaged. It's about learning to carry our damage without letting it define or destroy us. The Babadook is real. It lives in all of us, in the basement of our psyches, fed by everything we refuse to acknowledge. The question isn't whether it exists, but whether we have the courage to face it in the end. The scariest monster is always ourselves, or what we might become if we don't do the hard work of looking into our own darkness. But if we can find that courage, if we can turn and face what terrifies us most, we might discover that we're stronger than our monsters. We might discover that we can live with our darkness without being consumed by it. That's the real horror, and the real hope. If you're struggling with grief, trauma, or mental health challenges, please know that seeking help is an act of courage, not weakness. You don't have to face your darkness alone.